Well, we'll continue with a look at the responses and analysis to the President's State of the Nation address last week. One of the common views is that while he said a lot of things that were positive, there have been some big questions around the constitution of the state, particularly in the office of the presidency. Well, joining us for further reaction tonight is former Cabinet Minister Dr. Geraldine Fraser-Moleketi. Dr. Fraser-Moleketi, good evening to you and thanks for your time. We are in a period where the capacity of the state has been really brought under scrutiny and under question, and I think nothing outlines that more clearly than that report that we saw into the July unrest that highlights failures not just of cabinet but specific departments at multiple levels. You have a clear understanding of what we mean when we talk about the capacity of the state and the ability of the state to deliver on its mandate. Your own reflections of where we are right now and where our governance is.
Good evening, Kathy, and thanks for the opportunity. Good evening to those watching and listening this evening as well. I want to start at a point that's quite a simplistic one before I go into the detail of this discussion, Kathy. And I first and foremost would like to say that we must remember that the public service is everyone like your teachers or educators, your policemen and women, your correctional service officers, your health workers, and that. The people who were those that were able to carry us through the period of 2020, 2021, when we confronted a crisis of the magnitude such as COVID. I mean, we saw the incredible resilience of health workers, and that tells me that there is a public service that's functioning, and we cannot imagine South Africa without people working across all levels of the public sector, and that's local government, provincial and national government. For that to happen well, as you correctly point out, and as the President referred to in his State of the Nation address, we've got to ensure that we've got sound institutions. And he specifically said, and I quote, we are rebuilding the state and restoring trust and pride in public institutions, close quotes. We have seen failures, we've seen lack of coordination in instances, and I want to just state up front that this is not a uniquely South African phenomena. So it's necessary to say that what we saw was an absence in coherence, and the absence in coherence may result in a range of governance problems. And these are such as compartmentalization, fragmentation, you see competition, and incoherent objectives, as well as inconsistent policy mixes. These problems are aggravated when governments seek to deal with cross-cutting policy agendas. And furthermore, a lack of coherence can also result in unclear signals to the public about the relative importance of policy priorities. So very clearly, it comes to the point of a need for clear leadership, a need for policy coherence, and the need for strong institutions. And I do believe that we have a couple of centers of excellence across government. So we shouldn't make it seem as though everything is wrong or everything is out of kilter. And I want to say, for example, if we look at research coming out of CSIR, we have world-class research coming out of that particular entity, which points to the fact that we do have good public servants, but we need to ensure that the structure of government is fit for purpose. It will not help if we put in place duplicate structures instead of addressing problems where they exist. So there's a need for us to confront if there are particular institutions, if that's where the problem is, or deal with the human resource and capacity challenges, if that's where it lies, or also revisit some of the policies and the regulatory environments that we have in place. But the big issue is that the center has to hold. Over to you, Kathy.
You're raising a very important issue, and that seems to be among the key critiques of the State of the Nation address, and it really builds on something that has been watched. So we have a presidency that has set up 20-plus task teams, advisory councils. We have a presidency office that seems to be growing by the day, and many point to the functions that have been now left in or diverted to the office of the presidency, and question why it is that you have ministers in place to fulfill those very roles. From a bureaucratic point of view, can these advisory committees or even these individuals like Sipho, who's been appointed to cut red tape, how successful can they be when ultimately the implementation around any policy directive needs to still go through the department?
Well, so let me firstly say that there's some quite outstanding people who've been appointed to take up particular roles in advisory capacities. I recall in my past life as Minister of Public Service that there's always a need to look at the role of advisors and how it relates to cabinet. The President has put his this capacity in place, but these are advisors to the President. Where has been specific in the State of the Nation address is that he has said that Mr. Nkosi will be working across and with government departments to revisit the regulatory environment. So I presume that Mr. Sipho Nkosi will be working very closely with the cabinet ministers involved, and that there is probably an interministerial committee that will be put in place, because he will also be required to, he will also require close working within the administration itself. So it's going to be quite interesting to see this play out. As one considers this, we should also bear in mind that globally, there's always been a challenge between the roles of advisors as against those of directors general or permanent secretaries. So I think that this is one of the first issues that Sipho Nkosi will deal with in his terms of reference, is how is he going to cut across that part of the bureaucracy, because it's a very important bridge to cross, if I can put it that way.
One of the things that was said by an official in government, and I don't want to say who they were, but they pointed to some of the structures that the president is setting up as effectively saying, well, the president is trying to avoid taking action against some ministers who could well be ineffective, and that these individuals are effectively there